So welcome from our side. There are two names on the slide behind you. You can guess which one of them is me and which one of them is the other person. Just to little bit relieve your pressure. My name is Vaido.
Hi, I'm Kari.
Even though Vaida is a Latvian female name, so I had a lot of embarrassing situation in my childhood because of that. But luckily, we didn't invite any Latvians over. We had some Latvians over yesterday at Lift 99. Well, we have a spy.
One Latvian.
We have one Latvian, so now we have to be polite about Latvians, I suppose. Yesterday, unfortunately, I heard that nobody in Estonia wants to play with Latvians. I even got asked why, but this is not the topic of today. So, tervist.
Hello.
Hey.
Moi, or should I say cha-cha-ta?
And to the Latvian in the room, how was this good morning? I have forgotten. It's embarrassing again.
How is good morning in Latvian?
Labrīt, of course. So.
Morning. Still morning, right?
Well, I haven't had my first beer, so it's still morning. But we have gathered here, and usually this is the part where the hosts, say where the free Wi-Fi is, where the toilets are, thank the organizers, and then we will do something energetic to pump up and to get you raise hands. But again, as we are all from the Nordics, and then we also know that how much you all love that stuff, that you have to hug your neighbor and so on and so forth, right? So let's reverse it a little bit. So how many people in this room don't like to raise hands? Raise their hand. So we have one, so everybody else likes to raise their hands. So Erki is excused from asking questions. Everybody else throughout the panels will be actively raising their hand and asking questions. So, but before I get into my true morbid Nordic mood, maybe Kari actually can tell why we are really here.
Yeah, let's get a bit lighten up ourselves. So we don't want to get gloomy, definitely, but we want to be... Despite of being maybe a bit Nordic and very persistent and very precise, we are also very innovative, and we definitely see, especially during the hard times we're witnessing now in economy, the need to work together more. And on the Venture Capital Association side, over the past few years, we've been working with the Nordic and Baltic VCs a lot, talking about how to learn from each other's ecosystems, how to create more synergy, how to attract more LP capital to the region together. And last week, our Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, at her visit in Denmark, also emphasized that why not create a new Silicon Valley in the region, and let's try to be faster together. That could be our competitive edge.
Yeah, this is the problem that we get into, always we get into the troubles when our ministers take the stage. The previous Minister of Economic Affairs said that we need 500 deep tech startups, which is why I got hired. So we have now massive 125 deep tech startups in Estonia. So I'm really, really far away from my bonus. But that's a personal sad story. And now Kaja Kallas said that let's roll out the Nordic Tech Valley. So here we are. And we have a lot of enthusiasm, a bit of optimism, no plan whatsoever, no resources whatsoever. But anyway, so here we are. And I did some math in the morning that I had like a long story prepared what to tell you. And now I'm going to steal some time away from Deputy Chancellor, who actually has a keynote prepared. But I will tell a story anyway. That I calculated by numbers that in how many events I have been. So I said that roughly like 6-7 events per month, maybe 1 or 2 per week, multiplied it weeks, multiplied it by years. I've been in this business 12 years. So it might be my 1000th event where I'm on stage. And something that is rare, even more rare than unicorns, are actually useful events. Like I can see that people are nodding. So usually we end up being in relatively boring or, just another event. This one actually has a promise to be something more. And we will see whether it realizes, of course. It's only a potential. But with that potential, I will cut off our story here. And every nation has its own gray cardinal. In Estonia, it's not so gray. It's actually quite colorful, and it's a she. It's Sille Gram in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, who actually pulls some strings. So we are happy to invite her to the stage to give us a keynote what's happening in Estonia and in the Nordics. So now she needs a mic. So let's see if we have any mic.
She has a mic.
She has a mic. Great. So Sille, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sille, and actually I'm really glad to have an opportunity to set up a scheme and framework for today's discussions on Nordic Deep Tech Valley Talks. And maybe to open this topic a bit from the perspective of government as well. I do believe that all in this room agree that deep tech is not something that comes and goes. This is something that is called as a new innovation wave, and it will be a new innovation engine for our economic growth. And I think that this new tech or deep tech innovation will change our innovation ecosystems. And I think there are three main reasons. First of it is that we are tackling new grand challenges and so-called wicked problems. And these grand challenges and wicked problems can't be solved with existing technologies, existing instruments and tools. And there is need for new emerging deep technologies and combination of these technologies. And coming to the Estonian context, I think that it's quite obvious, and we do realize that probably we never can compete with high volume of production. But what we can do is to be a smart developer of these smart technologies. And I think here we have a really good starting point. Secondly, I think the second reason is that today's new generation doesn't accept anymore this widespread ecosystem, and they have way higher expectations. And we are not talking so much anymore about productivity, but we are talking about impactfulness and about impact what these new technologies can have. And thirdly, if you look at the statistics, and if you look statistics about investments made to different technologies, then in this list, the dominating deep technologies like AI, machine learning, space technologies, green technologies, and so on. So momentum is there. And if I tell about the European Commission aspect and the perspective, then Commission has also highlighted this topic strongly and launched the innovation agenda last year. And this new innovation agenda includes strongly topics related to deep tech. And it has set up two really beautiful ambitions. One of them is to create the best place where talent can work hand on hand and develop different advanced technologies. And second is to be a front runner of deep tech technologies and startups. And I think that it's very good opportunity for us, Nordic and Baltic countries, to use momentum and build here Nordic Tech Valley. And not to compete with others, but collaborate. And this Deep Tech Valley should base on really strong cooperation in attracting talents, in creating favorable environment, and etc. And again, when we look at statistics, then this graph is taken from one Finnish report. And if you look at these numbers, then we actually a really good starting point. Nordic countries invest relatively more into deep tech than other European countries. And as you can see, Nordic countries are leading. And Estonia with 16% is doing also pretty well, especially when we look at our national venture capital fund, SmartCap, that just launched our green tech fund. Amount 100 million euros, and also technology transfer fund will follow to that, and also we launched our deep tech fund. So these private investment and public investments amounts are increasing. And how we can be successful or become successful? I think a very important part or player is that our government is backing our ambitions. And I'm really glad that the proof of that, that will and ambitious is our joint action plan to develop deep tech entrepreneurship that was launched together with Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communication and Startup Estonia. And it was launched this year, February. And as we're thinking in billions, we are really ambitious, as Vaido said already. Our last Minister of Entrepreneurship and ICT challenged us and set up us really ambitious goals. So our goal is to reach 500 deep tech companies by 2030 and double the number of startups by 2025. And what are the main ingredients to be successful? I think there are main 5 ingredients, which are talented people, strong network, developed capital markets, excellent science, and also innovative government. And I would put talented people on the first place, because I do believe that everything starts with people who creates good ideas, and then the capital will follow. And I think here it's very important to remind that we have to understand what the future talents needs from environment. What are the expectations? How to create the journey, ideal journey to develop new companies in this region. And secondly, I think very important is to create a mechanism or favorable environment to facilitate mobility between academia to industry and vice versa. Because when people are moving, new links and connections will be built, and combination of different knowledges and experiences will create innovation, and it is very important. And as we are a really small country, we are really happy to approach or to test new approaches in education field as well, related to upskilling, reskilling. For example, we have very good examples for Vali IT, Code Jõhvi, Unicorn Squad, and etc. Then excellent research that is based our strong universities in this region. And I think our main challenge related to excellence science is so-called European paradox, which means that failure of European countries to translate scientific research into innovative solutions. And I think that when we have a strong universities and strong excellent science, then let's try together to translate this science into advanced technologies and commercial value. And capital, I've already talked about capital. I think here we are also in a very good starting point, and I see here state a really important cornerstone investor. And strong network, that's why we are here today. Strong network between companies from different maturity type, between universities, incubators, accelerators, etc. And I think one really good initiative that I'm really happy about is last year launched Creative Destruction Lab, which is so-called research-intensive or technology-intensive accelerator in helping to scale up companies. And the main value of this accelerator is to provide access to the top mentors. And one of the leading partner was Tartu University, and Kristjan Vassil, who was also leading this process, will be in the panel today as well. And maybe he will give out more detailed information about that. And innovative government, as I'm coming from government sector, then I do believe that the role of government has changed a lot during the last decades. The role of government is not anymore fix market failures But instead of fixing market failures, government role is to boost innovation and to help startups to develop new emerging technologies. And how government can do that, I think the main tool is to be open-minded in procuring innovative solutions. And I'm really happy that in our new government working plan, there is a concrete objective related to innovative procurement, that is 2% of all public sector procurements have to be innovative. I think it's a huge step. And I think we have to change our mindset about fail fast. We have to think, learn fast. And I think it's really different mindset. And it's never in public sector or maybe in private sector as well. There is never problems with technology. It's challenges related to mindset and challenges related to procedures. And I would like to have in government side as well a new KPI, for example, like learning per euro. We are not afraid of failing, but we are eager to learn and to be adapt and learn all during this journey. And what would be our value proposition? I think in this region we have several things we can be happy about. We can talk about region with hassle-free environment. We can talk about region who can attract talented people and help them to develop here. We can talk about the region who has excellent science, world top universities, and etc. And I also want to mention here one really great activity that will be launched in the second part of this year, which is NATO Diana Accelerator. Estonia will be one of the 4 accelerators that will be launched in this year in Tallinn, and headquarters of Diana will be here as well. And the objective of this accelerator is to develop dual-use technologies. So we invite all our good colleagues from Nordic country and Baltic country to participate in this accelerator. And lastly, like Vaido said already, my previous minister of entrepreneurship and IT, Mr. Andres Sutt, loved to challenge us. And he very often set up ambitious goals. And every time when he was setting these ambitious goals, we were holding our breath, what comes next? Because we were the ones who have to deliver that. So last time it was 500 deep tech companies by 2030. But I do believe that you get what you measure. And I really like this risk appetite and ambitious objectives. So I thought that maybe I will use some momentum as well this time. And I challenge all of you, Nordic and Baltic countries, to reach 20 deep tech unicorns by 2030. So you get what you measure. So let's join our forces, and probably Vaido will let me to do some commercial as well. I invite all of you tomorrow's Latitude side event, Thinking in Billions. Come and join us, and you can get to know not only think in billions, but make billions as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sille, for this beautiful goal that now we also have to deliver. Unfortunately, Sille has to leave, so we can't ask any more questions from her, which might be also actually useful before she figures out a few more goals for us to reach. I know that she has a board meeting to attend, the board of this particular institutions where I'm still working at. So thank you to Sille, and without further ado, let's invite our next panelists to the stage.
Yes, and the panel is about how can we maximize the deal flow of the most outstanding research and business prospects to the region. And I would like Kristjan on stage together with the panelists. So join, please, Kristjan, Vassil, Inka, Kari, Erki, and Mart.
And we will make our smooth disappearance.
Yes, we will.
So thank you all, and very warm welcome to this fine afternoon in this harbory area of Tallinn. It's my great privilege, on behalf of the panel, on behalf of the Startup Estonia, to welcome you here to this panel that deals with how to churn out R&D intensive companies or ideas, rather, out of the university laboratories, out of the R&D institutions, so that they can start growing and become investable companies and actually have an impact on our respective ecosystems and regions. So as Silla said in the very beginning, in fact, many European commissions have struggled with the fact, by comparison to US, for example, or Singapore, or other global regions, we know very well how to convert euros into knowledge. We're not so good at converting the knowledge back to euros. But we do have some great examples here. And we have, in this panel today, a fantastic lineup of people. We have Inka Mero, an MP of Voima Ventures, a deep tech VC, an investor, founder, entrepreneur, board member, and a top 10 most influential women executives in Finland. We have our own Erki Mölder, healthcare and life sciences investor for, what, about 20 years?
25 years.
A senior executive, has held many significant corporate positions in his past, and an MP in the Singapore-based Verge HealthTech VC fund. We have Mart Maasik he has an extensive background in corporate banking from Sweden, Estonia. He's an ecosystem builder and currently employed by the University of Tartu. His job is exactly the focus of our panel, to churn out those research-intensive companies out of our laboratories. And ultimately, we have Kari Sinivuori, who has a degree in industrial management. He is a senior executive. He has held many senior executive positions in R&D-intensive industries in the past. He is currently an entrepreneur in Uute Scientific, and he also knows what is port and starboard, what is deviation and declination. He is a sailor in his spare time, and much like with marine kind of terminology, I actually like to start with setting the course to our panel, to our discussions. And our roadmap involves 3 stages. We'd like to provide some diagnostical features of what is currently the description of the ecosystems in our respective regions in which we live, and most notably, what's wrong with it, what can be identified as the caveats. Then we will proceed to the treatment, what can be done, and then ultimately we get to the impact that is required. And we'll take occasionally questions from the audience. So regardless of these lamps that are completely blinding me, I'm gonna reach out. So stay attentive here on this matter. But dear panelists, I would like to start actually from the end. So instead of starting with the diagnostics, please think about where would you like to have our ecosystems in 10 years? What would be the ideal position if you had all the might, all the resources, all the knowledge? So forget about, for the moment, the diagnostics, about how to get there. Describe in a few sentences the ideal position of an ecosystem in which the deep tech companies flourish, and what are the tangible characteristics of that? Inka, can we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we have roughly 45,000 startups and scale-ups in the Nordics and Baltics. So I would say that in 10 years we could say that the target is to double that, and the share of deep tech startups could be roughly 40 to 50%. So in a way, that's what good would look like.
What's the nominal amount then that you would be looking at by 10 years, in year 10?
So basically that would mean roughly 20 5,000 to 40,000 deep tech startups in different stages. Today, the amount of deep tech funding is roughly 4.5 billion or to 5 billion in the whole Nordic Baltic region from the total venture asset class of 21 billion. So I would say that if we're actually getting towards that 21 billion in deep tech funding, that would also define the characteristics that we've been able to grow a lot of startups, but also the most successful have been raising the most of the money. Then if you look at, like, let's say, the number of deep tech unicorns, currently it's roughly 10-ish, depends how you calculate it. Of course, like Northvolts and Auras and others, but you could say that we could aim for roughly 100 to 150 deep tech unicorns. So that's what good would look like. But what does it require? It obviously requires a very fluidistic system that we do have a lot of talent flourishing to the Nordic and Baltic countries, and then somehow our research and university system has renewed in a way that actually it's very effective in spinning out companies and actually commercializing innovations. I'll leave the rest of the comments to the rest of the team.
Let's come to the rejuvenation of the universities in a bit. But Kari, maybe we can follow up with you with your thoughts.
I believe also in universities' potential, and I would like to see the VCs lining up in the lobbies of the universities to pitching up for the inventions that they are sort of pumping to the world, which is not really happening so much of today. And of course, the world should be free of immune-mediated diseases, but that's our thing to handle.
Thank you. Erki.
So what I would like to see is that all of the players are actually not playing the local game, but the regional game. So what we see already is that the startuppers, the researchers, they are moving from Tallinn to Helsinki, from Tallinn to Lund or Stockholm, after the money, after the research, after the jobs. So that's not a problem. We see already that our venture capitalists and angels, they are doing cross-border syndications. The venture capital funds are expanding their mandates beyond their home market. So very many Finnish funds have already said that Baltics are their home markets. So we see that investors are kind of playing already this regional play. What we still don't see, I think, we don't see the startup support ecosystem players, like the governments, playing the regional play. So they are still like Enterprise Estonia, like Business Finland. They are very much still concentrated on getting the benefit to the home yard. What I like to see is that all of the players are actually playing the local and the regional play.
Can I challenge you to be more specific about what is the government play? I mean, you're referring to a government play, and we're very good at diagnostics and the generalizations. Like, okay, the government has to do something, play the game more regional, less local. But to be a bit more specific, what exactly is the thing that you would like to see in 10 years that the government does and it doesn't do today?
So what we measure gets delivered, right? So we are measuring jobs created. We are measuring how much investments is coming to the country, and how many unicorns are there in Estonia, like our moderator said. So I would like to have the similar goal setting on the regional level, and I would like to see that, for example, Business Finland and Enterprise Estonia, they're working together, regardless where the company is, because I believe that if it comes to the region, there will be a lot of spillover effects that others will benefit.
Got it. Mart, your take on the 10-year perspective. You have a banking background now with the university. You've seen the financing world. You now see the academic world. Where are we heading at?
Yeah, I think in 10 years perspective, I see this GDP level impact. Definitely, this is one of the KPI to measure and to follow, which coming really research intensive parts. And to my perspective, there is two tracks.
So GDP level impact can be a double 3 decimal point impact, not so much of a change. What's the GDP level impact?
I think from that point of view that we are saying that one of the statements in Estonian point has been that 1/3 of GDP is driven by the tech companies. So I think more than half of it should come from the deep tech. So that's, I think, my ambition from point of view. So I think it's a long-term game. So from that deep tech point of view, it's not about like the only tech part. The deep tech makes it longer, but then it's more than half of the tech companies should come from under the deep tech umbrella. So that's my vision. And secondly, I believe it is also really important to play together with the large corporates, not only the deep techs as a spin-off separately, spin-out companies, but how to play together with industry. So that's another like the vehicle that needs to be up and running. And coming to the maybe the most important critical vision in my view is that to make it happen is really ability to build regional, as Erki is saying, teams. So bring together different competencies and being really agile on that point of view. So it's not about one university or one country. I think it's how we are putting together different competencies across the region at least and attracting to more talents. So I really believe talents attract talents. So, and we have to get this engine going. Okay.
Just one more thing. It would be very interesting to actually learn from Copenhagen, Lund, Malmö region development over the last 20 years. Kind of two different countries, two different ecosystems. Now they are very much like merged together.
Inka, how likely do you think such a collaboration between Estonia and Finland in particular, but also with an extension to elsewhere in the Nordics, is likely to happen?
Actually, I consider it quite likely. We're going to hit pretty tough economical times, and governments are actually in the Nordics and Baltics a bit short on, let's say, future growth due to the fact that our demographics are so challenging. We have such a high aging population. So if you think about macroeconomical environment, money tends to flow to regions where you have more talent and also future talent. So there's like prosperous future for labor intensivity. And the only way to grow that productivity is actually technological innovation. So, but the reform will take time. But to put a context to this, already today, I think it's roughly 15 billion of European Union money that is roughly invested into the R&D ecosystem across the board in EU altogether. And this obviously is a platform for the Nordics and Baltics to grow together because there's a lot of EU level funding which the governments can deploy and utilize, and also the universities can utilize. So it's not only governmental level action that is needed. The challenge in a way is that there's so many levels that has to kind of renew itself, starting from the individual research level to the university, to the startup team, to the investors, to the ecosystem and all of that. So I consider this to be likely. There will be a lot of efforts, but it's not that we would be the only players in the world trying to do the same thing. So same will happen in France, or maybe with France and Spain, and in different parts of Europe, but also in Asia and in US. So the question is like, how can we do it smarter?
Correct. So one of the things that in the preparation of this panel, we discussed a lot about the talent. And I think what's characteristic, it kind of echoed through that, is that both Estonia and Finland and the Nordic countries in general like to punch above their weight. I mean, they like to create kind of ecosystems, or their ambition is clearly targeted. And I think Silla's keynote clearly indicated that ambition. But the talent, particularly in Estonia and in Finland, being small populations, is scarce to find nominally speaking, not intellectually speaking, but nominally. Kari, to which degree the availability of the talent hinders the regional ecosystem, if not your own enterprises?
I would say not at all, because with this COVID pandemic, at least we got to sort of work with teams and these type of other ways that people can be living wherever they want. And I believe that talent attracts talent. So people who are interested in, for example, what we are doing are contacting us. And it doesn't matter if they are living in New York or New Zealand. We can still cooperate with those guys together. So I don't think that this sort of physical presence is so important anymore. You are there where you like to be. And then you just build your own ecosystem around yourself. And I think in the universities, for example, there should be better focus that, okay, University of X is really good at something, and then the other university is really good at something else. And then if they push to that direction, they will attract talented people, and then they could become sort of world-class players, even if we are so little in numbers here in the Nordics.
So let me tell you, by comparison, how sharp is the distinction between what Kari said, and I think it's accurate from the entrepreneur point of view. From the university's point of view, we have a chronic deficit of talent The largest university in Estonia, the Tartu University, has a bit less than 2,000 academic researchers on their staff. On average, the research team size is about 5 to 7, depending on how you count people. So if you would like to add capacities to those research teams, then you run into a brick wall immediately. University of Helsinki, which is about 2.5 to 4 times larger, depending on whether you count the money or the staff or the disciplines that they cover, isn't in much better situation because of the heterogeneity that the university has to cover. Yet, they are the key, and now comes my question, or are they, to funnel the deep tech deal flow that is interesting for the investor, and is the lack of the amount of people, the nominal amount of people in the universities, a caveat that hinders that deal flow? Mart, you've seen that from the first row.
Yes, I think it is multi-way, I think, challenging point of view how to solve it. So what we see, I think, is really high responsibility from the researcher side. They know that if they're stepping out from the lab, there is no one left behind it. So, and that's kind of like the responsibility that they feel, so that they cannot do it. So and how we're building those type of bridges for the people who are following and who will take the next steps out from the lab. And the same part as well, that I think we see more now, the new generation researchers, I think, they are starting to design their career that this is the work and the part that I will do under the university umbrella, and this is my entrepreneurial track. But this is, I think, the challenging part from our point of view, that legal framework and also, I think, the market tolerance to being on the both sides, both sides, setting the shoes of the entrepreneur and researchers. I think we haven't built that kind of framework for it. So I think probably this is the only way, I believe, in the shorter run, that we have to build environment when the great researchers can do both at the beginning, and then also onboard those entrepreneurial minds next to themselves, who will carry further and who will become like the business drivers of those ideas. But at the beginning, they have to work in parallel, really close to each other.
Erki,
there is a huge problem in that we are all sort of reacting at the moment, because, for example, the researchers behind us are still working at the university, and there are huge dual role problems. So essentially we can't work anymore with the research teams because of these problems. That like the lawyers at the university are just putting sort of red tape too much to the project. So we just have to figure out other ways around it. I think that's a great succession, but at least the Finnish law, or how it's interpreted, doesn't allow it at all.
That stands in sharp contrast to, for example, the Stanford ecosystem, to which we look up very frequently. We'll have Erki and then Inka.
Yeah, so 2 questions. Are we doing the right things, or are we doing the things right? So, we need the universities, we need the researchers to do the things right, to get kind of the toolbox ready to start to take this innovation out from the university. And certainly I agree that we need more magnitude, we need more kind of resources so that the selection is better. But the question is that, are we doing the right thing in the innovation process? Are we innovating the right technologies? We are very much working together with, not with Stanford, but with Harvard and Massachusetts. And there is a consortium called CIMIT, and they have a specific kind of logic how they evaluate the startups in the medtech field. So they did the research some 10 years ago, 600 companies, and they looked kind of what companies are really efficient in taking the research into the business. And the 3 main outcomes were, first of all, the companies that followed the market pull were likely to be more successful compared to the companies who were following technology push. So this is the question kind of, are we doing the right things or not? The second thing is that, or was that actually the teams in the startups actually had very good education in the technical field, in the clinical field, in the research field, but they rarely had very little understanding on the process of innovation and understanding what does innovation mean. It's not the linear continuation of the research, but it's something else. And the third thing was that once you put these young startuppers together into the same room with the mentors, with the advisors, with the people who have been there, done that, you make a tremendous difference. So this is kind of the thing that we should take into consideration when we are building this Nordic thing. And I think it's very difficult for the small countries, being it Estonia, Finland, or some other country, to build it by themselves, because the deep tech area is so complicated. We need to kind of be together.
Very good points. Just to put a context, like to MIT, for example, which has, its alumni have spun out more than 10,000 companies. In Finland, we put and invest to the academic system anything between 1.5 to 2 billion on a yearly basis. And if you put on top of that national R&D funding, actually the numbers start to be really, really high. And then still the volume of let's say, roughly tech transfer startups is anything between 30 to max 70 per year from roughly 12 universities. So 5 million people, over 10 universities, we're sort of a small Chinese town.
So let me just pause you here. It's about 2.5 billion that Finland invests into its R&D activities, including the
into academic system.
Into the academic system. Estonia invests into the whole R&D 0.3 billion.
Exactly.
So this is the numbers of the scale.
So exactly, and they're sort of coming back to the point, like, are we doing the right things or the things right? So I'm just saying, like, I think with the current resources, current money, we could get so much more out of the system, but just by taking out the friction of transferring your tech outside the university, and remembering that it's not like taxpayers' money or money owned by the university, it's actually governmental investment to future R&D. Secondly, sort of making sure that people who spin out these companies can be coming out of the academia, but also from the business life. They can be experienced entrepreneurs and all of that. So growing the fluidity of the sort of a tech transfer rules is one of the core things in the system. If you start just thinking that every single startup has to negotiate one by one always with the university on these kind of topics, that's one. Then the second thing, of course, is that you get what you measure. So if you measure academic publications and PhDs and the number of students, that's what you get. But if you measure the number of new companies or innovations being created, that's what you get. So this is another angle. And then just context to Sweden, where actually researchers actually own their own IP. It's much more easier to go outside the academia and establish your own business, and then even go back. Then these attitudes, they actually take a long time to change. That's another thing. And I think we kind of made that cultural change in Finland through the slush generation, and I think at the same time Estonia did the same thing. But similar sort of a cultural change is needed, and that probably comes from that serendipity of bringing together these role models and unicorn founders and investors, and then scientific researchers who want to become entrepreneurs. And let's also remember, it doesn't mean that everyone has to become an entrepreneur. We just need to lower the friction.
So I suspect that Startup Estonia called me to chair this panel because I am the friction to a large degree, and I clearly recognize those caveats. We've been, as universities, very diligent about trying to remove these frictional points. When we talk about talents, we have actually the mobility schemes instated in our universities, where researchers can leave the university for a set time, years, not months, years, with having a 100% degree certainty that in case of failure, the university will re-employ them as researchers. So I'd say that these mobility issues are covered in many cases. What are not covered, to what Kari hinted, I think, and which is really important and stands in sharp contrast with the systems like you have in MIT or in Stanford, is that the dual positions in the Nordics are looked at with certain skepticism. In Estonia in particular, you can face criminal charges if you as a researcher develop an IP based on the public funding and go and try to establish a company. We are working hard currently with our Ministry of Justice to remove that obvious hurdle, because this is exactly what we need. We need our people to build IPs within the universities or other research institutions. And I think the university is really in favor of the fact that it's not necessarily the only universities that can churn out IP. It's all kinds of actors within the market. So as you see, we are now slowly moving toward the treatment areas. What are the kinds of the treatments that would remove these frictions? Erki, you have had extensive experience in healthcare, probably the most difficult in terms of its long development cycles. Give us a few examples. How do you remove these friction points to churn out the deep tech innovations out of the research environments?
Yeah, I've been in healthcare for 25 years, and one thing what I have learned is that micro speed and macro patience. It takes a lot of time, and you just have to be really managing your expectations. When we talk about deep tech knowledge transfer ecosystem, then we can talk about 5 different elements, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes to guide you through there. First of all, certainly you have to generate the knowledge. And to generate the knowledge, you have to put money into the research, and you have to generate the culture within the university that not only publications are important, but patents and technology transfer as well. So there actually it is very, very, very easily the function of money that's put into the system. Now what goes to the second element of the ecosystem, that is the knowledge transfer or incubators, accelerators. My suggestion here is that universities, and I'm going to be very unpopular now, universities have been playing the game that they are kind of want to be responsible of this knowledge transfer, but actually they are not really kind of doing anything because it would take the talent out of the university. And it's very obvious that it's very difficult to promote the tech transfer if the good teams will leave the university and the university cannot get any granting money out of that. So first of all, the main thing that I would do is that I would kind of decrease the role of the universities in the tech transfer ecosystem subpart. The third thing are the regulations. And you have pointed out very well that the regulations in the IP are super important, and they are a problem for now. Another very good example in the healthcare is that the way how Europe has over-regulated itself in the healthcare data management, genetic data management, it's just crazy. All European companies are super under pressure because the US and the Chinese logic-based companies can move much more faster because they can have much more access to the data of the people that's needed to do the innovation. So the regulation is IP and data access. Then the fourth point for me is that the demand. Where does the demand come from in the early stage in the companies where they can test their solutions? And I do not see currently, at least in Estonia, kind of the demand of the hospitals and demand of the insurance fund to adopt any new innovations. Why? Because still the society tolerates the politicians going to the news and say that, hey, we need just 200 more million. And everybody kind of accepts this. And no one really wants to challenge the politicians that, hey, why don't we actually start to look for the efficiencies in the system? And then the innovation could find a place where you could prove that it works. And you have to prove it domestically before you scale it internationally. So we are facing clear problems in demand for these kind of deep tech solutions. And the fifth thing is the funding ecosystem. And here actually I'm not very pessimistic because, as I said, different angel groups and VC companies are having and becoming more and more regional.
So, I mean, you described the resilience, or rather the transition from the sick care systems that we have currently going on to the healthcare system, which is an impossible task for any sitting governmental minister to achieve.
Unless they are under super big financial pressure.
Or yeah, exactly. But I'm sure there are some universalities to this. It's not only applicable to healthcare system. I mean, clearly, in your second or third point, you deprived Mart of his current work, and you said, okay, we're going to have to get rid of the tech transfer offices in the universities.
No, I said decrease the role. But there has to be someone else who wants to take
Got
this.
it. Got it.
We don't have this plan.
That's exactly how I read it. Mart, what's your take on that?
Yeah, my job has always been I'm working for the reason to not have a job. So if the system works really well, that's really good. So I think this is the mindset. What I see, I think it's from that point of view, there is the one angle is about how we are getting out from university, but how we are building the team. And coming from the technology side, and I think most cases it is the key, and I believe there is definitely the value, understanding in the early days that those researchers are not the only ones who will make a successful company out from it. So, and I think it's not maybe before, before the point second, what you're saying, there is 1.5, there is the research work, which is outcome of it, and what you're saying that this is maybe not first implementation is not actually the right one. The market demand is not there. So it means that you have to build a team as well. So and now the question is that should we build the capability of the teams on the university side already outside from university? So I think this is a bit of my dilemma. So and I think the understanding the entrepreneurial mindset, what is also Inka saying is about this mindset shift, that has to be happen already really early. So among of those researchers, and I think there is the definitely role for it.
I guess, Kari, you had the mindset, but it took a bit of a time to spin your company out from the university.
Yeah.
And this is obviously the challenge. It might be that the entrepreneurial mindset, that people just get frustrated because the process takes extremely long
Yes,
time.
absolutely. I fully agree with from that Erki's point that time point of view, yes, we have to have the standard conditions, and we have made a prototype actually. It's up and running, and we have the first the cases what we tried to handle on that way that we are pre-agreeing the conditions, and then there is not the negotiations every team. So already you're knowing what the future going to look like if you are meeting some certain criteria, and then you can process quite fast.
So I'm thinking if we just could combine the best ingredients from the region. So if we could take the Swedish long-term sort of a view, they actually incubate their deep tech companies longer in the academia, and that's really good. If we could take that, and then we could take the Finnish sort of a public funding, Business Finland type of a attitude, sort of a shared risk taking, and then we could take this Estonian way of sort of a taking out the friction and sort of a creating the new rules of the game, and maybe the Norwegian money. I think that would be nice.
Yeah. Very good. Let's go home.
Yeah.
Kari, how does it sound? I mean, you've experienced, maybe you'd like to share your story about how you spun out the company and the frictions along, how those would be remedied based on the concept that Inka just laid out.
Well, I was sitting in the middle of the friction also myself, and I would say that the friction is not really the problem. The problem is that you don't know the direction, because as Inka was saying, you get what you measure, and if you are not, or the universities are not measured by the number of spin-outs, you will not get any out.
No, thankfully not.
Yeah, and then
only.
Yeah, and it's like in sailing. You can have really smooth maneuvers, but if you don't know the direction or the way you are going, you will never get there. So just measuring things. You have to have certain amount of startups, for example, every year, and maybe half of your 2.5 billion euro would be tied into that. And then if first it would probably be just like 2 billion, but then it would go back to 3 billion, and the society would be so much more rich with the new companies that are generating additional revenue when we change the attitude from research spending to research investment.
So Inka, maybe you can explain a little bit about, I mean, one of the things in which Finland really has excelled is the public-private partnerships, and they have excelled to a degree. I mean, in this country, we've almost forgot how to do these things. We were good at it when we regained our independence, but gradually they have disappeared, and we don't see them. They're really far and few between. This removes some of the frictions as well in the ecosystem, particularly in the fields where you have public assets on top of which you would like to build private companies.
Absolutely, and in this respect, I think Finland has been quite good in launching new public-private partnership programs and also ending the unnecessary ones. And I think the culture itself is that the foundation was laid and created during the Nokia growth times, because basically the whole company and the ecosystem was short on talent. So the university started to collaborate in the tech ecosystem, but also the public funding started to fund the R&D and the patenting activity and all of that. So I think the good sides in that system are obviously that when you are an established startup, you might get growth funding, which is equal to your private equity in the R&D or like in grants or like market exploration or internationalization. So that's good, but that doesn't yet exist for deep tech ecosystem startups, because you might be developing your quantum technology for the next 5 years in the lab and doing a lot of pilots, but not generating revenue. So that has to renew quickly. But I would like to emphasize that if there's a public-private partnership, public money can only be leveraging the private money-taking risk. It should never be in an overweighted role, and that the public money should never decide, in a way, the direction where the investments are going. In hindsight, of course, when it comes to deep tech and universities, R&D and all of that, I think this specialization is extremely important. If you scatter your resources, you'll get nothing out of it. So that's also like a bit like coming back to this difference between Sweden and Finland and Estonia. In Finland, I think the total amount of funding is in the right bracket, but it's not going to the right focus areas. And then thirdly, we do have certain gaps, and recognizing these gaps is quite essential. So roughly 15 years ago, there was an initiative to generate a VC ecosystem to Finland, and that's what was called a Vigo program in Finland. That's how my investment company got started. That's how Lifeline Ventures got started. Many of the Finnish VCs were created during that time, and that took like 5 years, and then it was ended. And now I think the biggest gap in deep tech funding is not even in angel or VC, early seed money. It's actually when you need to take that leap of faith to build that first plant or to get that first satellite to the space. So this big investment that deep tech tends to require. And in biotech, it's even more risk taking. So that model works extremely well if you have a trust ecosystem, and I think, of course, let's say Business Finland has been doing a solid job there, and there's a lot to learn from for both Sweden and Estonia from that part. But also it shouldn't become a sustaining prophecy in a sense.
Let's quickly touch upon also the KPIs that you mentioned. Erki and Mart. If we were to change the KPIs of those institutions, universities, research labs, etc., who churn out those ideas that are ready to be commercialized, and we delve off, let's just fantasize. Let's stop measuring, as Inka said, the number of PhDs, the number of publications, and the number of citations. And please don't quote me on that. What do you think would happen tangibly? Would that alleviate some of the concerns that the ecosystem currently faces?
I think it's the reason why people become researchers. I think, can we change with the KPIs? So that's my kind of question about that. I think it's a dual roles in somehow. So we have to respect and rebel in some ways, so that there is definitely, we cannot focus only the output side. And I think this is my kind of connecting tanks in my view. So if you're not kind of filling in the background, like the work and also the deep, like the research, there is never, we don't have in the longer run critical mass of the deep tech's outcome. So I think we still have to balance it. So it's not about radically turning around it, but rather I think seeing that this 50-50 mindset. So this is the half part which is really necessary to put as a critical foundation, and this is the second 50% that is about output that we're looking for. And I think this is maybe the one of the KPI, not on the university level, but maybe on the country level, that there is maybe how many of you have heard about university's third mission statement like that? Raise your hand. Only few of it. So I think this is a kind of broader problem. I think we don't understand as a society what is the third mission of university, and the best way to serve it is, I believe, it's through the entrepreneurship. So to serve the society and put the research to the practice, this is the third mission. And I think if you have the KPI which is directly serve that goal, I think then we have the better balance.
But I think your point is extremely important. You can't expect to have a flourishing deep tech ecosystem if you're not investing to the core research and create world's leading research in certain key fields. So that is one part you can't sort of cut from. And then there is this other part which relates to the tech transfer and KPIs maybe related and sort of a friction removing and all of that.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the overlapping a bit always. It's not the point like here is divide of it. So I think the overlap is good, and we're a bit of stepping to the toes each other, which is I think good and makes sense that we are taking the efficiency out from the system. So this is necessary, but we have to respect each other. I think this is the necessary for the building a long-term goal.
And respecting other is also respecting the researchers, because half of the researchers would never like to do anything related to companies, and actually they even couldn't because they are never ready. There's always the next decimal to be figured out, and without that we couldn't call this stuff deep tech, because this would be just like average tech. But when you go deep enough, you dive into the silo so deep that you can't really see anything more at the bottom, where really the core scientists in that area are. And then we need some generalists to sort of make business happen out of that. But without the guys in the bottom, there is nothing.
Thank you. So we have about 8 minutes left until we break for the next session. I'd like to have the mic around somewhere in the audience, because that would in its own right encourage people to raise their hands and have a few questions to our distinguished panel. Please just wave your hand and let us know if you have any questions.
The mic is working.
There's one in the back.
Yeah, the mic is working, so the mic is also moving.
My name is Toon Poppe. I'm from Belgium, and I was here for prospection for partners just before Corona, because I had a patent on the ultimate health app based on AI at the moment when everybody still was laughing with us that we were using AI. Now, after it's chat, blah, 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 everybody admires us and tells us that we are very far ahead. Now, why I'm here now is to look for partners to develop my health app, because Estonia is the only country where you have a completely digitized health system. In fact, a complete digitized system in the whole country. So that's why I suggest don't stay in the Nordic countries alone. Come to Belgium and come to Brussels, because Brussels is the capital of Europe. So I'm looking for the correct partners financially and technologically. All the ones I visited 3 years ago didn't move, but Corona was the very big reason. Now, my last remark is that I thought after Corona that everybody would embrace me for the app, because it would protect us preventively for the next pandemic which is going to come.
Thank you.
And then nobody cares.
Thank you. I'm sure that invitation is extended equally to Finnish and Swedish and other Nordic countries as well, Inka.
But there is an angle, and I think it's what you mentioned a bit, like there's now this saying about public procurement, which is massive on the governmental level in all of the countries, if 1 or 2% would go to innovative companies. But you could also do that as a sandbox for, biotech companies, for space tech companies, for defense tech companies. So Actually, this kind of could be a challenge for the whole governmental and regional governmental level to actually collaborate in innovative sourcing and creating these boxes which actually give faster access to market for deep tech startups.
Thank you. There's a question.
Hi, I am Artur Gamberg from Creative Destruction Lab, which was mentioned here a few times. So as mentioned, we deal with a lot of deep tech companies. And one of the things that I think Inka brought out is, and something that we've encountered across this past year of the program, is that usually the R&D phase, the seed phase, the angel phase, this is not so much of a problem. But where the startups, at least in the later years or lately, tend to sort of run aground is when it's, okay, we have the tech, now it's time to take this substantial leap of faith, a substantial investment to actually launch production, to actually commercialize from this pilot phase onwards. So how do we first of all, I agree with that, this does seem to be the shortcoming or the bottleneck for actually taking these great initiatives and actually reaching this unicorn stage. So how would you propose to address this issue or solve this?
Thank you. That's Erki.
Yeah. So I think the uniqueness of the deep tech company is that when you start this development or innovation, then actually you don't have the definite answer where shall it be applied and how. So you are developing the technology without exactly knowing what will be the context where it will be applied. Now, during the process, when you are doing more scientific experiments, you are shutting some doors and you may open some others. And now the question is the team equipped with the experience and understanding how to notice and really analyze this data that is coming in? Are they making the right choices? Do they understand what are the opportunities and where the doors are closed? What we see in Europe very, very often is that, once you get your first R&D funding, you can get the next one and the next one. And pretty much you are 6-7 years in doing the research, but no commercial success. So I think that we have to develop these commercial competencies of the teams to say that, hey, we are going that direction and we are going to shut the door there.
Thank you. We have space for one very short, one-sentence questions that ends with a question mark and to which we can very quickly answer.
Okay, maybe I think you can answer this quite quickly. So what for each of you, would be a good example of where deep tech has gone from research to business and has been successful?
Example. Well, I think one of my favorite examples is ISAI, the Finnish satellite tech company developing the SAR radar. And they, for example, helped a lot of our Ukrainian friends in discovering enemy bases. So that's a classical story. And the same university lab has actually spun out multiple space tech companies. So this is a classical example where the top tier research, top tier talent that has gathered around the university actually has then started to create a fantastic initiatives. That's one of my favorites.
Any other thoughts on that? If not, we have about 2 minutes to close. Before asking for your final thoughts, when Startup Estonia asked me to join this panel and when we prepared this, we kind of implicitly agreed there has to be something tangible to come out of it so that it's useful for the Startup Estonia community and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and so on. What you see, I think, very neatly emerging from this panel is a call for the Nordic Tech Valley Summit statement on how to build a regional hub that has capacities to have global impact. And just to very briefly sum up, I think Inka very neatly outlined the core of that concept, taking the strengths of from each of the Nordic countries. The long-term perspective with which Sweden is very well known, the agility, if I got it right, that Estonia is well known, and both the amount of capital, the excessive funding, and also the public-private partnership experience from Finland. And if we can combine that and I've seen already a few politicians in the audience as well, if you can combine this with sufficient amount of funding that between countries who differ, fivefold, so that the funding doesn't differ 10 or 15-fold, then probably you will have the recipe for a good ecosystem. And I'm sure, I'm speaking on behalf of the panel, we can draw up that statement in a nutshell. Your final thoughts, Kari?
Yeah, I think that's quite good summary. Just complementing it with the target. So, okay, what do we want to get for the money? That should be measured, and if we are not getting what we want for the money, there should be consequences.
Thank you, Mart.
And I think funding is the key, absolutely, but also DNA of capital is key. So what type of capital we're looking for to really being entrepreneurial and also early days ready without any return of investment at the beginning. This mindset also needs to be there.
Erki.
So for me, again, I come to the beginning, technology push versus the market pull. Estonian healthcare system is 2.2 billion. 2% of it is close to 50 million. If 50 million would be dedicated to procure for new things, it would be quite a lot for us. And additional source of market pull is to get the companies from the world here to search for these solutions and technologies.
Inka.
I echo all of this. I think I've said all I think about this topic, so very good summary from the colleagues.
Thank you. So just give us a few days. We're going to draw up the sample plan for you and we're ready to roll. Thank you all.
Thank you.